we're just gonna, here's the agenda. We're gonna do a quick review of the two different types of tracks to go through. We have a little scenario that we can do some sample scoring, quick discussion, and a quick review of the online process. As Jen, see Jen, look at that, incorporated already. There are, just to remind everybody, there are 3 different types of abstracts submitted for the conference: oral presentations, which are 30 to 60 minutes, or a discussion group, which are encouraged to be interactive. We then have posters, and again, Jen, I think your formatting got a little messed up there when I cut and paste over. So we then have posters. Let's go like this. Oh, I can't do that right now. So we have posters. And then we have research and evaluation track. And the research and evaluation track sessions are designed to provide a technical training on the planning and program evaluation in real world healthcare settings, equip attendees with practical knowledge and skills via how-to lessons. Data from studies should be presented as a vehicle to illustrate and teach. So that's the main difference with the REC track versus others, is that we really are hoping people leave with a skill. And so we'll go from there. If you are brand new to reviewing, basically Jackie will have sent you, if you are on the general conference side, a link. I'll have sent to you your PDFs, but you'll have some links to follow. You'll go to CFHA, you'll sign in, you'll open the PDF sent to you of your sessions, general sessions. If then you have links inside there, I'll show you. If you're on the REC side, you'll open your rubric, you'll answer questions, you'll rate, add comments, choose a recommendation, and submit. Just want to give that quick overview process. So what I thought I would do is real quick go through the general session and poster ratings first, and then move on quickly to the REC sessions. So there are 3 questions you're going to answer right off the bat for general session and posters, which is, does the proposal show evidence of interdisciplinary collaboration? Is the proposal clearly connected to evidence, empirical evidence? And does it show evidence of family-centered approaches to care? Jen, is there anything you want to add about those 3 questions? I think they're pretty straightforward. They're a bit literal.
Yes, I have some tidbits I'll just bring in. So wait, maybe there's some of that later. Never mind. You were amazing in incorporating some of those slides. Great job.
Okay, so
Yep.
I'll let you jump in just a minute. No, that's great. So then, real quick, so then when you're the dimensions, so after you answer these, yes, no questions, you're going to move on to, I'm just referring to the dimensions of the area, or the areas that you're going to rate, which are importance, innovation, originality, clarity, organization, and interactive format. And for each one of these, you're going to give one of these ratings: unacceptable with many major weaknesses, fair, good, very strong, and outstanding. And then if we go down here and we try to then operationalize for a moment, and Jen, I'm going to let you, if you feel familiar with these slides, and then just give me a beep and I'll advance.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I just broke out each of these dimensions and tried to give you some helpful tidbits that might be useful as you go through reviewing on these dimensions. So the criteria for importance is that it's consistent with the CFHA mission, that it addresses the theme, and it's likely to draw interest of the membership. The importance in this is knowing your audience of the CFHA membership. And so I just put some helpful pieces of information for those who may not be as familiar with CFHA's membership. We are an interprofessional mix of attendees from a variety of healthcare settings and backgrounds. The mission of CFHA is to support healthcare professionals in integrating physical and mental health. And we encourage proposals reflecting all integrated care models, not just one model like care management, collaborative care, or PCBH. We encourage them all. And we have a lot of special populations and settings that are of interest to the membership, like geriatrics, pediatrics, the justice system, schools, etc. This year's theme, which is important to know as you begin the review process, is celebrating frontline integrated healthcare workers. So abstracts may highlight how that they're tailored for different professions, license types, efforts to scale up the workforce, highlighting the work of the different workers, strategies for collecting data, improving equity in other hard to reach populations like rural populations, and really just lifting voices of underserved. And so when you're reviewing, you want to think about these things, you want to think about the audience, and that should be impacting your score and importance, because that's the criteria. It's whether this abstract that you're reading, it can be from a variety of topics. It can share clinical innovation. It could share actual data from an evaluation. It can be teaching a skill. All of those things can be important, but you want to think about it from the perspective of the audience that is going to be at this conference, and keeping these things in mind, especially the theme.
Okay, next.
For innovation and originality, the criteria is that it's innovative, unique, and timely, that it's presenting data, outcomes, or lessons learned by, based on research or evaluation work. Some helpful advice is that you may not be an expert in all of these areas, and that's not expected. You may read about something in an abstract that you've never heard of that could be innovative to you, but you want to kind of think about what might be innovative to the membership. So for instance, I'm very much lacking in knowledge on pediatrics. So when I review things, if I get a pediatric abstract, this is a quick and handy thing that I do. I Google, like if they're telling me about a clinical innovation that's named blah, I quickly do a Google search just to see, is this something that people have been talking about for a long time? And I just don't know because I'm not in that literature. And you can make a comment if you rate it a certain way and you're unsure, you can put in the comment box, I'm not a specialist or expert in this area. I think it's innovative, but I don't know. And that will help the team who is reviewing the ratings be able to understand your rating. Presentations that share data are encouraged. However, it's important to consider why is this data important? Does this data give you a general sense of what's going to be meaningful from it? How was it collected? Where was it collected? How many, etc.
Yeah.
If they do present data. Not all of our abstracts do, but that's something to consider when you do.
Yeah. So one thing, Jen, I just would add to that, especially if you're a newer reviewer like that, you're not an expert in a field, maybe you Google, you can put it in a comment. Also know that all abstracts are also reviewed by more than one person. So your one rating is not the make or break for somebody, because I think that's everybody's being a helper in the field. Nobody wants to not let somebody come to the conference, and so you tend to have you have more than one person. So next.
And that comment box is used when it's discrepant. I was on the planning committee one year, and an abstract who had very discrepant ratings, we would look at the comment box, and that would be helpful to us. You're not expected to be an expert in everything.
So you're up next with clarity and organization.
Proposal that's, you want to be able to understand what the abstract is saying. So this particular rating has to do with whether it's well organized, it's clear, and it's rationale, you understand the learning objectives. And, if you can't understand it, or what will be specifically, given in the presentation, then consider it to be low on this dimension. Interactive component is encouraged, creative interactions with the audience that are appropriate in length and support the objectives. Obviously, this does not apply to posters. It's hard to do with a poster, impossible, if you might say. And it really may or may not be needed depending on the abstract's focus. So it can take a lot of different forms. It can just be questions and answers, small group activities. So you really just need to think about what is the material they're presenting, and are they in a meaningful way thinking about that in interaction. And then I just gave some tidbits on the overall recommendation. You can give your subjective opinion in this case across all the ratings of your ratings, and weighting them as you feel is appropriate. So you may feel that this is so innovative that it must be accepted as an oral presentation as it's submitted. Or you may feel that it could be oral presentation or a poster presentation,
All right.
or that it's only really matching the needs of a poster presentation, or that it's not acceptable at all. Helpful advice: before you make this recommendation, please look to see what the presenter actually said that they were willing to do. Presenters get to say whether they're willing to do a poster or an alternate format. So make sure you look at that as you consider your options. You do get to give us suggestions on 30, 60, or discussion group. And for those who have never been to the conference, or maybe never been to the discussion group of the conference, because at the virtual conference, it looked a little different. Discussion groups, when it's an in-person conference, is a roundtable discussion. It often happens during break or lunch when members gather around a specific topic. So some abstracts are really portable to that particular format, some not.
Jen, would you at all say, and again, feel free to correct me on this, that there might be a slightly lesser threshold to get to a discussion table, or do you feel like that the threshold for acceptance of that is the same as oral or oral presentation?
I think there's a lot of topics. I don't want to say that's a bad thing to say that it's a discussion group. There's a lot of topics where discussion and having a full discussion is actually what the presenters are really wanting to do, and it's more engaging. And so, yes, it's a little less maybe rigorous in the ratings as others, but I don't actually think it's less meaningful. I've participated in a lot of those discussion groups and walked away with a lot.
Yep.
I think it's unusual, and so people who are newer to the conference may not know that they're as valuable as they are, but I think there are actually a lot of people who gain a fair bit from them, and to be asked to be doing it on a topic may match with your material really, really well.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead real quick. This is a quick mini summary with a fewer bullets than what Jen had produced, but that is there as well. And then I'm going to go on real quick to the training track. So just again, to remind everybody, there are two different rating approaches, although there's overlap. There are two different ones to the general sessions and the posters and the discussion groups relative to the REC track, and that's because of that, especially because of that particular training feature. So real quick, for the training track, we have the dimensions are the fit with the track, the overall teaching approach, and uses research-based or practice-based evidence. And then our ratings are poor, fair, good, and excellent, where things are a little bit different over time. And I know Jen was early on in this. The REC has a rather elaborate or a much more elaborate rubric than, let me go over here, than in the general sessions. So I'm just going to go through. So if we go back real quick, I'm just going to go back here real quick and do. So here are the poor, fair, good, excellent. Here's the poor, fair, good, excellent. Here's the criteria or the dimension, as I used the terminology on the other page. So we'll say the fit with the research and evaluation track, and then you would go across. And again, you're doing this kind of gut approach. You're just really looking at the title. You read the abstract, its objectives. Is it relevant to developing or refining a skill set? So again, that is such an important piece. And so in this case, it's not relevant to us defining a skill set or to conducting R&E, no real clear connection, doesn't really support the state of objectives of the training track. And we actually see this a lot. And I think sometimes what we see is, I think some people, when they checked off this box, may not have read, like a lot of people, I do this a lot, may not have read the directions fully. And then again, as you go across, the criteria just gets a little bit more stringent. So then minimally relevant, relevant, and very relevant, and supports. And then you're starting to look at a much more tighter connection that the presentation really is geared towards training. Some people will, I think, have presentations and they might throw them in here, but they weren't they are helpful, but they didn't necessarily worded or oriented towards training, or that's an afterthought. So then we go to the overall
teaching. Can I just say something about that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead.
So when we talk about teaching a skill, it's really important to remember that in the R&E track, it's a skill related to conducting research, program evaluation, or quality improvement. That could be like, how do you engage people in that process? Or it could be like measures, it could be like data collection, data analysis, but it's not necessarily a clinical skill. This conference also gets a lot of people who share clinical skills, which are amazing, and really wonderful abstracts to have be as part of the conference as well, but they don't necessarily fit in the R&E track.
And so here, the overall teaching approach does not include effective teaching elements. Attendees not advised how they might practice or given resources. The approach is unlikely to leave somebody with a refined skill set. Now, or to develop or refine a skill set. And then again, as you go across, the scoring gets a little bit more stringent, minimally effective, satisfactory effect, includes satisfactory effective teaching elements. And again, for anybody, if you've ever gone to a, maybe you might say you're not an expert in conference pedagogy, but I think we all get a sense of what works and doesn't work. So if you want to be looking for things like attendees will do X, Y, or Z, there will be small breakout groups, even a good Q&A or brainstorming session or something that it involves is an element that really engages the group and seems like it would lead to actually somebody learning a skill. Now, we do want to be realistic. We are talking about 60 minutes. So you don't want to bring your most complete, you don't want to be so literal. They really is the idea, somebody going to walk away something they could reasonably go and try and apply. I think, Jen, it's fairly reasonable to say that. Finally, uses research-based or practice-based evidence. So again, one of the other ideas of this track is there's actually something to kind of back up or being used as a way to demonstrate the skill that's being learned. So, here we go, makes no connections to the proposed topic with the existing data. So basically, somebody's doing something, but they really don't even mention data, or they don't really mention any evidence. Makes minimal connection to the topic within the evidence base. Again, it's preliminary or published data. Maybe no theory or model. And then again, as we go across, it gets a little bit more stringent. Jen, do you want to comment here? Because I think sometimes people can get a little confused about the evidence base versus bringing data.
Yeah, I think
Jen is so thoughtful about this comment. We'll see if she makes it back here. I will try to.
Am I doing something,
Wait, Jen, we lost.
Oh.
Jen, we lost you for that entire speech you just gave.
Oh, I'm so sad. That was so good.
It was, and you know what? It will be just as good on the second time.
Let's see if I can remember it. So what I was saying, and I'm sorry that my thing blipped out, is, there's a variety of ways to bring or see evidence within research and evaluation track, training track abstracts or proposals. One way is something like, I often bring smaller program evaluations that I do. So it's a practice-based program that maybe doesn't exist very far out, and we collect program evaluation data pre-post or maybe longer term than that. And I'm using that data to help people understand how we engage the stakeholders to get the data. And we talk about, like, how did we get those providers to give us feedback about that program, or how did we get the patients, and all the different approaches. Then there's also ways where you can use research to do that. So for instance, some people have presented recently, and I think last year's conference presented like how they used they developed a measure and actually examined its psychometrics within a practicing clinic. And that was what I would consider as more research-based, because it's the psychometrics that they were really working on is supporting the survey. But they talked about how they did that within a bustling healthcare system. I don't know if that answers your question well, but that's just
Yeah,
different
no, that
ways.
does.
I think it's variable. I think it can happen in a lot of different ways. And the intention is in the excellent category that they are making the link with either the approach being evidence-based or that there's some evidence driving the decisions or the things that they're sharing with the group.
All right. So Jen, I don't know if you have to jump off now or you'll just jump off. Okay, Jen, thank you so much. That was
Sorry to leave.
awesome.
Have a good day,
Awesome.
everybody.
All right, take care.
Thank
And
you.
everybody, if it's okay, I want to continue on. I have an example. I realize this is much too hard really to absorb all of this in the moment, but let's go ahead and we'll give it a try. So we're going to go through an example session. And then I have a little online tool called Mentimeter. I'll send you a code. We'll go on to that and actually put the questions up for all of the both types of sessions up there. And we'll be able to just see what we want. It'll be anonymous, so we won't even see what we put up for our ratings. We won't feel so much self-doubt, because I know I always feel a tremendous of self-doubt whenever I'm doing these. So here is our sample. I don't have a title for it, but here's our sample session. And these are this example session objectives. Describe and differentiate 4 global models of integrated youth health services. Outline the critical role of youth, families, and communities to support the development, implementation, and scaling of centers, hubs, and services. David, that spelling of centers is a shout out to you in the UK.
Thank you for that.
Yep. And then describe the value added of diverse organizations working together to learn how integrated youth healthcare can best be organized and delivered. So this is going to be a little wieldy to take in. I will go ahead and read it. By the way, I did change some of the centers in here to the US spelling just so that everybody saw their center in the talk. So real quick for the past, I'll let you, I can't tell if people can read this, so I'll read it along. Maybe you can go ahead. For the past decade, Canada, Ireland, and Australia have been working to address the urgent mental health needs of young people and their families. Our 3 countries share the challenge of low barrier entry points for young people to access coordinated and evidence-based care, while matching the intensity of the care to the young person's readiness need. As the demand increases for integrated mental health services to be developed and funded, opportunity exists for Canada and their partners to develop, refine, and share lessons about integrated models of healthcare for young people and their families. Foundry and Youth Wellness Hubs, Ontario, Headspace, and Jigsaw centers have been delivering in-person and virtual integrated health services to young people in 12 to 24, Canada, Australia, and Ireland, respectively. The presentation will discuss lessons from the 4 organizations, representing over 200 diverse centers, hubs, and communities for COVID-19 response, expansion, telehealth, multidisciplinary training, service implementation, partnership, government, Indigenous relations, youth. There's a lot of stuff there. We also highlight the critical role of youth families and communities to support development, implementation, scaling of centers, hubs. And we will highlight actionable steps the organization are taking to bring equitable healthcare to all people, outlining each organization's careful consideration for socioeconomic inequities in healthcare and paths to move forward. There's a lot of sentences. So I'll say, maybe we'll just finish off there. It's hard to read all this. I'll end with this dialogue. We'll highlight different perspectives, sharing insights and innovations that stand to strengthen integrative and collaborative youth healthcare. So what we're going to do here is, I realize that's so much to absorb, but we'll just for fun, I'm going to go up to the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the information in the chat. So you're going to go to www.menti, just menti.com. And then you are going to enter this code 83294719. I'm going to bring over on this screen, not that screen. I'm going to bring over my other screen. 1 second. Here we go. Does everybody see this on your screen? Do you see the Mentimeter? Yep.
See what?
Do you see on your screen a big question in front of you? Does the,
Does the proposal show evidence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so you can go ahead and choose your answer. I'll choose, I don't think I get to choose. All right, so then we would go to the next question. Is the proposal clearly connected to empirical evidence? Okay. Real quick, any comments? So why don't we'll stop as we go through. So anybody want to say anything about how they got to their no evidence? It might be obvious, but just so you don't hear me speaking. And that's because you saw no evidence presented. All right, we will go on. Sometimes the obvious is just too difficult to say out loud. All right, so if we did the next question, does the proposal show evidence of family-centered approaches to care? You all might be able to flip back to that screen. Do we have a competing one? All right. Oh, this is the best outcome of all. All right. So everybody there's no risk here. This is just a fun exercise. So anybody who did a yes versus a no? Then you had, yeah, thanks, Alex. Well, Alex, can you say something about your yes or your no?
Sure. It was a lot to take in, and it's taxing my short-term memory of the proposal.
Yeah.
But I feel like they discussed sort of how they take a collaborative approach and sort of work within the system. And I think I maybe in my head conflated that with sort of family-centered approaches.
Yeah. Okay. So they were talking about it, and so kind of that was you're going like weighing. They're talking about, does that count? Does anybody who want to say argue no?
Mine was a no, because I thought they were talking about it and I thought that was great and it was interesting, but I couldn't actually see any evidence of how that worked. I mean, basic as that. So for me, it was a no. It was interesting, but it was a no.
Yeah. And anybody, so I try to be a realist about these situations. I'm not sure we could I'm not sure we could get to inter-rater reliability on this one. I think in reality, you probably would see a variety, where you're going to see a variety of people. And it really would come down to evidence of family-centered approaches to care. And so some people might argue that seeing them talk about the importance of family-centered care, that they're going to talk about it in a general session, they might feel that that's okay, and others might feel not. And I think here's a good spot where I think if you have multiple raters, that's where you end up flushing out. I think I might steer a little towards a yes on that one, but again, I don't have it back up in front of me to go back and look at it real quick. But again, I think it's fair to go either way. Somebody else who is leading this, if Jen was here, she might have a much clearer demarcation. But let's go on to the next question. So this is the one about, so now we're getting on to the ratings down here. So if we go back to the idea of importance was thinking about attendees, thinking about the theme of the conference, thinking about kind of relative to the field, and I realize we don't really have a chance to go Google. So broadly speaking, how important do we think the topic is to the field around innovative approaches to mental health access for children and youth? So everybody can, this one's harder, right? Oh, I see. It just, when I click on it, it gives percentages. We'll do that. All right. So any thoughts here about this? I love this. This is a great range, and this is what I see because I end up seeing all the review come back, the reviewer ratings when they come back to me on the REC evaluations. Anybody want to comment here? I just wonder if I should.
I leaned a little,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Alex.
I leaned a little higher. It seems important to the field. It seems like thinking about the audience, there would be several folks interested, kind of touches on a broad range of, kind of add some variability of patient population.
Okay, Alyssa?
So I thought it was good, but it was missing, from what I remember from everything you read, it was missing actual data. It has relevance to the field, but I didn't hear the family centeredness of it. I inferred it rather than reading it. And I think I thought it was important. It was good, but it needed cleaning up, if you will.
Okay, yeah. I will say generally as an abstract, it was not, I will get to another about cohesiveness, at least in that regard. All right, so again, here you see this variation. Again, I'm, I think, let's go through the other ones, and then we might then, I think, just in practice, come back and reflect on, well, maybe there are some other ones, maybe the importance might go a little higher if some of the other ones captured some of the weaknesses that we see in the proposal. So I'm going to go to the next one. So innovation and originality of the proposal, not necessarily of the topic itself. Okay, so we notice that everybody shifts a little bit this way. And here again might be one way where we would go Google a bit to see about how innovative is this approach. I think I'd probably steer a little bit, I'm just going to say for them a little bit more to the left on this one. I think, although it's interesting, it does sound like what they're doing is innovative. So here's again, I'll tell you, let's do this. Let's go forward and look at the other ones, and then we'll come back and reflect on these. Clarity and organization of the presentation. All right, so everybody kind of picks up, there's kind of a lot jumbled in that one, so we shift a lot more to the left. And interactive format. Okay, and again, we all shift because we just don't see it in the presentation. We just don't see much there asking the audience to participate. Okay, so I'll go to the next one. So I'm gonna real quick, we're gonna go super quick through the REC rating so we can come back and have a discussion. I do have a pretty hard stop right at 1 o'clock. So I'm just going to help out here. So the fit with the training track, and that, just to go back, is would somebody leave this with a skill in research and or program evaluation? And we can just leave that there. Yeah, I'm going to say we just don't see anything described there for that. Would we say the overall teaching approach? Yeah, maybe there's something there because they're somehow maybe going to describe different things, but there's not really clear what they're going to do as a method to actually teach. So yeah, so it stays down on this side. And then finally, does it use research-based or practice-based evidence? And again, I see this, I'm pretty certain this was not an REC presentation when it was done. So let's come back then to, and I'll just kind of scooch back real quick, overall teaching, come back. So one thing you might weigh is whether, whether if we say the importance to the community does, you might then weigh when you look at all of them together, does it feel like some of the weaknesses of the presentation are caught somewhere else such that the importance might still be a higher score? That's one way to go about that. But again, as you see, there's a little bit of variation going across all of these. So real quick, I'm going to go ahead and stop share and just open up for some general questions and thoughts for the moment. I may not present the submission process. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to click on some links. They're going to be check off boxes to fill out, and comments are the most important. But David, you've been doing this for a few years.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, and Alex, I can't remember if you've done any in the past. No. And Astrid, you have done them in the past, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Many,
So David,
over many years.
yeah. So I'll go to David, and then Astrid, I'll ask you too. David, any words of wisdom for our new reviewers?
I think the funny thing for me was, and it kind of comes out with that kind of Mentimeter thing, is when I look at it, I think I've probably got tougher over the years. I think when I started, I was, I think I was very generous. I read things like, oh, this is really, really interesting, and I'd get a bit caught up in how interesting it was. I think, oh, that interests me. And often I would give a lot of sort of benefit of the doubt. I think it was interesting looking at that Mentimeter thing, because when I started to score it, I realized that I was scoring much harder than I probably would have done, say, even 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember we did a similar exercise with Bill Sieber one time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I noted with Bill is he's a tough marker.
And Bill was, and I thought I was being harsh. Bill went 4 clicks to the left.
That's exactly right.
Or Bill is now recorded in perpetuity on this.
Yes, but it was. I think that's one of the things that I have noticed, and actually I think that partly comes out of just experience, exposure to doing them, and starting to get in a relative sense. Because I think that's the other thing I found, that when I've done it is it's tempting to do one and you think, right, I know where that is, but then I think when you've done 2 or 3, I would then often go back and think, hey, I need to relook at those to get a feel of start to orientate to one to the other. Does that make sense, Bill?
I think those are great. I think those are 2 great tips. If you're new, again, it's this human nature to feel like you're preventing somebody from an opportunity.
Yeah.
And so you tend to be a little more generous. And I think your second one, it is less efficient in the actual reviewing process, but the extent that you could quickly scan, like if you have 5 or 6 to do or whatever, to scan several of them, you really do get a quick sense of that comparative thing. It's kind of like here grading. I tend to give much higher scores initially in the first things I grade. And then I have to hold that standard. Then I find the paper that's really amazing, and I wish I could go back. But so anyway, that's a good tip. Astrid, anything you want to share from your time doing them?
Well, I think it's always very difficult when the presentations vary very much in how people present things, and to sort out what the data really show and so on, and not wanting to be, some people want to be very harsh and it's got to be perfect, and others say, I'll give it a chance. So it's difficult in that the ratings are criteria are broad.
Yeah.
And that's the biggie.
Yeah, these are not going to meet.
You want to be fair, and what's good as compared to very good. Yeah, that's always a problem.
Yeah, and so we can say, and this is probably sometimes where I go, I'm probably, yes, David, I'm a little more critical than I was. And then on average, David, I still bet we're a little bit more maybe generous sometimes than others might be. And I think because this is not there's no scale development here. These are not psychometric.
Exactly, that's the problem.
Yeah, but the nice thing, I think the thing that counters it again for Alex, Chelsea, and Alyssa is, and then again, anybody who ends up watching this is there are multiple raters, and so you're not alone. And then Jackie, I think you could confirm, and I'm just saying Jackie because I realize you might be doing other things. All right, there. Even say like after everyone rates on your side for the general session and the posters, and on the REC side, they're still getting another look, right? In terms of.
Yeah, so we take the scores from the 3 reviewers and everybody gets a rank, you know, and then we rank them kind of the top, middle, the bottom sessions.
Yeah.
We use the information from the RAC and from the SIGs to see which they feel is like most relevant, most important, best session. So that goes in there too. And then the selection committee, which is made up of pretty much like Natalia and Martha and the co-chairs, then hash out like, maybe there's 4 that were top ranked, but they're the same exact session. We might not need all those. Maybe there's something that was in the bottom that didn't rank well, but just because of the description, or we're not addressing the session in any other way, I mean, the topic. And so maybe they just need like to be revisited and say, hey, make sure you include this area or this present or something like that. So there is more work that goes into it then too.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I think that can help reduce some of that kind of internal bias to want to be more generous at times. And then finally, one thing that I'll end up putting this on the slides that I'll send to you, Jackie, or in the next day or so. Maybe they can be posted up with the video. We'll have to figure that out or not, but
they can definitely be posted, but send them to Liana in addition to me.
Because you're going away. Yep. And then the one thing, so if you're doing REC, Alex and Alyssa, and I'm not sure Chelsea if you're going to be signed up with us or the general sessions. You may not even know.
I think the general session.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So for the REC ones, Alyssa, because everybody who's on the REC does have to do them, if you're a voting member, which is I found you get a number of good ones that are pretty, some that are like really sound research, but there's 0 teaching. There is 0 skill building. And in that case, you simply recommend them. There's when you do the final recommendations, there's recommend for the general as a general session. So you still, even if you feel like the rate's low but it's a good session, you can still recommend them for the general sessions. And so there's, again, I think odds are working in the favor of people getting to present. And again, I think that can help then bring a little bit more critical eye. All right, just in a time, Alyssa, any thoughts or questions or?
No, this was really helpful. And I think helped me to kind of clarify my thinking around, because I've done journal reviews and how critical I can be. So somewhere in the middle, right? Listening to what David had to say and then doing this exercise.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say a journal does have a higher standard, though, we're bringing standards, but I mean, there is that higher standard in that journal review. Yeah.
Yeah,
Alex,
so this was helpful.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex, I thought, go ahead.
I think I was just nodding in agreement. Has been helpful. I enjoy the, where my perception stacks up to others and what the thought process is.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing I always, because I get to see everybody's ratings and mine, I'm like, oh, phew, I think I came close to Bill. We'll throw that out there, or David or whoever. And I think it's a piece of the process people don't talk a lot about is how much our kind of self-appraisal of our knowledge and skills gets activated when we're looking at this. And but hopefully a few ideas here are helpful to that. So Chelsea, any thoughts, questions?
It was a helpful overview, and David's comments were really helpful too.
Okay, and I'm sorry to have all of CFHA have to see this, but Chelsea, so nice to see you. Chelsea was a student of mine. I would meet with her on her site visits. I'm going to one in 2 minutes. And such a joy to see that you're doing the work and still part of CFHA. And that's so exciting. So,
You too.
all right. Anyway, nice to see everybody. This will get posted back out. I'm going to get just for each of you, I will specifically send the slides to you once I do a little bit more editing. And then I will also send them, Jackie, to you and Leanna. And thank you all for coming. Astrid, thanks so much for your thoughts. And David, thank you for coming.
Pleasure. It's
Thank
always
you,
good.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
See ya.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.